I lost my mother to alcoholism, and the disease it took her life, and I was the one that found her. My dad would always say, oh, she just has another sinus infection. At one point, she was using a walker. I mean, she was like a skeleton of herself. And as much as I was saddened by it, I was more mad. I didn't exactly get to have any sense of closure. I have guilt for the way that I was towards her. But now I'm a world champion bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder, and I own businesses.
If you could just start from the very beginning, like where does your story begin? Like who is Dr. Megan?
Sure. So I am born and raised in Oceanside, California. I still live here today. My life began with mostly sports, right? Always athletic. And I played basketball in college, got a full ride scholarship, and then came back, and both my parents were teachers. So education has always been something really big component of my life. So I got my master's in physical education and health. And then after that, I got my doctorate in health and human performance. That's kind of where a lot of like the foundation of what I do now began. I currently own a fitness studio in Oceanside called Everybody's Fit, and I help with anything from general population to medical fitness like Parkinson's or people in addiction recovery, cancer, seniors, and of course just weight loss and strength training. Then right next door, I own a outpatient addiction treatment center called Mindful Bodies Recovery. And that is a passion business that I own because when I was 20, unfortunately, I lost my mother to alcoholism, and the disease it took her life, and I was the one that found her. So it was a traumatic event that, I made the best of, and has transpired me into now helping others, not just the fitness realm, but also in the substance abuse and mental health realm.
Wow. That's really interesting. Well, I just want to go back to you mentioned that you were raised an athlete, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about like the role that sports played in your life? How did it develop your mindset towards like just life in general?
Sure. So my dad is actually the winningest basketball coach in California high school history. So basketball was always like a key component of my life. But I did play, soccer, softball, just constantly active. Like after school, it was right to a practice or right to a game, and then not get home till 7 or 8, even later at night, and then having the discipline of having to get all your homework done too. And because my parents were teachers, school was so important. And to this day, like I've never gotten anything less than an A in a class. Just very focused. And the lessons that I was taught is that you always have to show up. You don't miss a practice, you don't miss a game, you don't miss an assignment. So, sports alone teach you a lot about, teamwork, being a leader, problem solving, communication, being able to encourage and help others, the value of practicing as something you want to be good at, and also what it feels like to win, and also what it feels like to lose, and to be resilient for many of those.
Right. I love that. And what about in terms of control? How would you say that you are when it comes to control?
I think that a little bit before COVID, I really came into kind of Christianity and the Serenity Prayer because I've always, had a little anxiety in my life and what I can as a perfectionist, right? So my mom was a world champion baton twirler. So although I have like the addictive traits and qualities, right, I've, transformed them into something positive, but it also has a perfectionist, avenue about it. So when I go about something, I go into it with trying to control all factors, but we can't control everything. And so being able to be flexible, and pivot and change as needed, but still keep in mind, the big picture and the ultimate goal. Sometimes you just have to adjust. And learning from the experience and mistakes of others is a good way to not go down the same path. And your parents always say they want you to do better than they did. So they're only there to give you their advice to help you grow and be your best.
Yeah. I just find it fascinating because on the one hand, you had very, very high achieving parents who not only did really well in their lives, but also expected so much from you. And on the other hand, you had a mother who was battling alcohol. So how did like discipline and your kind of mindset of being an athlete and all the discipline that came with that blend together with knowing what was happening at home with your mom?
Sure. So the simple answer would be that I hid in basketball in school, right? Ignoring or pretending that something didn't exist. That if you're always gone at a practice or at a game, or if you're always in your bedroom doing your homework, it's a way of ignoring it, pretending that what's going on inside the house is and that nobody knows about it. Because I hid in basketball and school and sports, I was also very naive to it. For the longest time, I truly believed that, like, my dad would always say, "Oh, she just has another sinus infection." And I mean, I didn't really know what alcohol does to someone. She hid it for a long time. Like something like she would make dinner and then go upstairs and not eat with us. Well, it just kind of seemed like she just wanted some alone time or something like that. And she would come back down and eat later. Just little things like that. I never went to parties, and I didn't do, the whole like boys and social thing too much. So I didn't even know what alcoholism was. And then when her life, as you said, kind of like started falling apart, like she was no longer able to uphold having a job, that she had some DUIs, and then understanding that she couldn't drive anymore and things like that. That's when it all kind of started to, okay, this is a reality, and I'm kind of now part of it, right? Now I'm going to have to take her to meetings now. I mean, she was like a skeleton of herself. And as much as I was saddened by it, I was more mad. I was more hateful. And that's just being like, that's a mixture of being a bratty teenager and, combined with not understanding the mental health side that she was struggling with, as well as, the disease that was taking over her. I mean, she was powerless to it. Understanding that she would go away to rehabilitation, for a period of time. And that's when it was like, okay, this is a real thing. But when you're young, you just don't really connect the dots too much. Things like, she wasn't able to make my high school graduation, something like that, where it was like, how could you miss something like that? And so I was just like mad. But then at the same time, your expectations of that person lower. Like it was kind of like normal that she wouldn't be able to come. And it's a lot of, my ticket to kind of get away from all that was going to be from school and sports. So I chose to go to a college out of state in Colorado. As much as I wanted to stay in like the San Diego area and be able to like have my dad come watch me play, it was also better for me to leave at that time because it was kind of at the height of her struggles. In my today's world, like I didn't exactly get to have any sense of closure. I have, guilt for the way that I was towards her. So, as much as I want to say that I was mad at her and even hated her at that time, I also received all of her great traits, right? Like she was a world champion baton twirler, which they don't even have baton anymore. But now I'm a world champion bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder. She was very smart and intelligent, and now I've written books and I own businesses. She ran a household and was able to get, 3 kids one through law school, one to open, my sister owns a dance studio in LA. So she was generous and kind and always wanted to help other people. And so I got that from her too.
You mentioned earlier guilt is something that you kind of battle with quite a lot. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. So guilt is like a complicated emotion because it's it's reactive. So there's nothing you can do about what took place. All I can do now is say the serenity prayer, and then there's always forgiveness. So at this point of my life, if you continue to live life and not forgive people, it's going to carry with you into everything else. It's going to somehow expose itself. And so we have to, forgiveness, they say forgive and forget. Forgetting is the hard part. For me, forgiving is not necessarily understanding 100% what took place, but 100% understanding that like I can't control it or do anything about it now. So
Right.
guilt is something that for some people it's almost just it's a worry, and worrying doesn't change anything. So guilt doesn't change anything. And living with guilt, like I said, will resurface in other places. But my mom was, she was super strong and intelligent and talented. So I feel guilty for being a teenage brat to her and saying awful, hurtful things, right? But like, what would I do about that now? There's a lot of things that I would have, should have, could have, and wish that I could have said or done. But we live and learn, right, as they say, and mistakes are
Yeah.
opportunities for growth. And so now moving forward, when I'm
Mm.
surrounded or part of someone's life who has a struggle like that, I understand that I can't control any of their behaviors, that it has to come from them internally, that I have to almost be accepting of the fact that they are in control of their actions and I'm in control of mine, and I can choose to be part of their life or not, but that it's a disease. And there's always some underlying mental health condition that's transpiring this to happen. So I've learned a lot
Mm.
about maybe compassion and maybe empathy too.
Yeah.
I would say that
Mm.
I have kind of a more like everyday tie your shoes and get out. It doesn't matter what's taking place, that you have to keep going. I definitely have that
Mm.
attitude.
Yeah, I think that like that's a really good way to put it. And I kind of want to go back to what you said earlier as well about how like, we can't really control. I did an episode with someone who struggled with alcohol and drugs, and they mentioned that own mother had to actually like kick them out of the house at one point, and they had to experience almost being homeless. And every time his mom would open the doors and let him back in, she was in her own way kind of enabling him to steal. He would steal things and sell things and then like make money from that to buy drugs. For him, he had to hit that rock bottom. That rock bottom was the thing that was really important for him to be able to realize, okay, this is like enough is enough, and I have to turn my life around. And of course, it's very different for different people because some people may not get to that point of hitting rock bottom, and for some people, they just don't make it, right? And so I think it's really important, that message that you're saying here as well, is that like, yeah, no one really can sit here and tell you what's the right way or the wrong way to deal with it, because for some people it works and for some people it doesn't. It sounds like you and your dad did do quite a lot in terms of sending her to rehabilitation centers and trying to help her through it. Like she needed to find
Sure.
that kind of reason for herself. Yeah.
Going back to the guilt part, is that when she would go to rehabilitation and then come back, and it'd be like a stellar 2 weeks of abstinence from alcohol, but she had to sit in her own feelings, right? In her own emotions. And that's where she would get in her head about feeling
Mm.
guilty about the people, places, and things that had taken place that affected other people, and how felt bad she feels about that, and how she feels like, what is my purpose anymore? I'm not able to teach. I'm not able to, I know she felt guilty about the way that she was a mother to me, things like that. But that was all internalized, right?
Yeah.
That guilt would reach its threshold and breaking point, and then she'd fall back into masking it, and self-medicating with alcohol. So that's where guilt comes in a lot. And rock
Mm.
bottom, everyone has it. There's no one size fits all. It's an individual experience when it comes to recovery and addiction. But rock bottom, I mean, some people can tolerate like the worst of the worst, and then, I mean, the substance or the alcohol is so powerful that they succumb to it. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, the ultimate
Right.
consequence is death, right? But some people can even get as close to and almost get there, and still it's not enough.
There was no one way about it. I mean, different people have totally different experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I do find it really fascinating that you mentioned earlier, though, like, your mom was a baton twirler, so I'm sure she was super disciplined in her own way in order for her to be a champion in this area. The amount of work that she must have had to put in being in the sports field, and I can see that that's been passed down to you and your siblings as well, and just the way that you run your life today. But at the same time, that your mom had turned to alcohol, so addiction was a thing. What was that turning point for her? Was there a specific thing that caused it, or was it just a slow progress?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with she was an only child. And then my grandfather passed away, so her dad, that was a big component of it. And he was an alcoholic too, functioning though. And then just some things that like I have recently learned of in the past 5 to 10 years of just, some personal circumstances in her relationships that there's things that she had a lot of broken trust in a lot of different areas in her life. And yet, because she was a perfectionist and disciplined, she didn't want that image to be tainted. And so, although she had no control over being able to fix things or make things, you know, not not exist that do, it was a way for her to cope and to not feel and to not think about those
Right.
things. She had some really great friendships that she confided a lot of things that were going on in her life, but she didn't really want anyone to know about that. And so, whether she was even hiding that image when she was in rehab and things like that from, really being able to process, she was holding on to a lot and medicating to not have to think and not have to deal with a lot of internal aspects that she could have maybe changed the environment that she was in and maybe left it, but she chose to stay. So that's how she dealt with it.
How did your family sort of like deal with the grief when your mom passed?
Each of us had like a different relationship with her. So I was in her everyday life, where my brother and sister were already, my sister was married and my brother was in New
In
York,
college.
going to law school. So they were somewhat removed from seeing
Oh,
it and living it part of it. So to them, her passing was more of a shock, where for my dad and myself, it was like, this is where it was going to end up. Um, so that would
mm,
obviously affect grief, right? In knowing like that this day was coming versus like what was, how could this take place?
mm,
Um, and then my dad, he took a leave of absence from teaching and then eventually retired early. And, and my brother and sister just continued to start their families and carry on. And I know that they're very saddened and affected by the fact that she's not here to be a grandma to their kids because she would have spoiled her grandchildren like to the nines. Like Christmas at our house was like there was the Christmas tree and then there was, 15 feet worth of presents extending out the
yeah.
room. Um, I think all of us have like different holes that we wish she was here that she could fill. And I was young and they were older, so but it's your mom. Like no one can ever replace your mom. And as sick as she was, I'd take her
Yeah.
back in a heart. I would take her back in a heartbeat. All the drama, all the, trips to the emergency room, I would do it because but I wasn't mature enough and I wasn't educated enough as to what was going on with her to know. And maybe if I were older, I could have maybe found a different avenue for her to seek treatment. I think that for her, like how my addiction treatment center is, I think she would have done better with an outpatient treatment center where she went for like 3 or 6 hours a day because for her,
Mm,
as I mentioned before, like she would go away for 30 to 90 days and then return. And then it's like, once you now return and sit where you were when the problem existed, I mean, how do you cope? And I think she would have done better with like going
Mm,
somewhere for 3 to 6 hours a day and incorporating it to still be able to, be a mom and be not totally
mm,
separating herself. I'll never know,
mm.
but it's something that I think about.
That's actually a really good point. Do you feel like it's important that, all these rehabilitation centers offer inpatient followed by outpatient before letting the patient go? Do you feel like that would be more successful for a lot of people? Maybe like start off with inpatient for those that are very, very severely addicted and they really need to be weaned off it and monitored 24/7. But after they've kind of gone through that initial withdrawal phase, to then go through an outpatient option so that they have that ability to integrate their their lives with it, like learn how to live in the real world with it? Or do you feel like there is a reason why there are inpatient only centers versus outpatient only centers?
So a lot of it does, obviously it's the case by case basis, but it depends on the severity of the individuals using. There's also a lot that goes into being able to seek treatment, your resources and what you have. So a person might need to actually go to detox before they can even enter a facility, inpatient or outpatient. Like for us, you can't have been using for a certain amount of time before we can accept you. You cannot actively be using, right? So there's that. And then there's the whole component of insurance. Do you have insurance? If you don't have insurance, or maybe you have to find
Mm,
places that have Medi-Cal, paying out of pocket is just not an option. Or so we might have someone who, wants to become a patient, and yes, we accept their insurance, but their deductible is so high and they can't even afford to pay the deductible. So they're turned away, because then they don't have the
mm,
money to pay out of pocket. And also, if you like are going to do an inpatient, that's obviously much more expensive. And then if you decided to have a sober living, you still have to come up with the money to pay rent. So there's a lot that goes into it versus like, my grandmother must have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to help her, right? Not everyone has that. So there's a lot that has to go into it.
mm,
And that's another reason why a lot of addicts remain addicts. And then usually it doesn't work the first
mm,
time, so then it's like revisiting your resources again. And that is why
mm,
many addicts, they run through relationships because they just, they, they will dry some, take some, dry all the resources that they have out and use everyone they can in their selfishness, because of the disease. So a lot of people end up with their pockets empty and trying to help someone.
Yeah, that's really sad. I can imagine otherwise, why for certain individuals they just keep finding themselves back in that cycle, because it's a whole combination of things. It's one, easy access to it. Two, it's that next hit, which is so much bigger than your own self discipline, and then coupled with whatever emotional trauma that you're having to unravel, which you haven't been given therapy or anything. This is your kind of medicine in a sense. So it almost feels like all the forces out against you, and then these institutions being really expensive, like really expensive as well. So it's kind of like, then where does it really end? Like, so what kind of method then do you feel like is the most effective then in helping someone rehabilitate from this? What are some of the success stories?
Well, obviously everything is confidential and anonymous, but most people do well. And this is just saying a generalized approach. It's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy. So that might be, you're meeting with a therapist, and it's all about dual diagnosis. So you have to treat the mental health component of it, not just the addiction. You have to address the underlying reasons, the causes. Otherwise, just
Mm,
having someone not drink for or not use for a period of time is a great accomplishment. But like with my mom, things are
mm,
going to resurface. Also, there are meeting with a psychiatrist, and you might try medication management. So that can be from the mental health side, depression, anxiety, bipolar, anything that is one of those conditions that are attributing to the addiction that, medication can assist with. There are also medications available, such as that can help you stop drinking, and that also, something like methadone can be in use. And there's all sorts of different newer avenues like ketamine and different things like that that I'm not as educated about because we don't offer that, but people do go down that realm as well. There's EMDR therapy, and then there's the component of group support. So that could be AA, that could be NA. And some people actually are very successful with just deciding to stop and attending meetings. And that social network and support is enough for them, which is great. And they work the 12 steps. And that community is incredible. And a lot of people have a lot of success just with that. And and then there's, other tools. That have many benefits, using exercise as a tool, finding a hobby to replace the time spent that you once were using. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. And then another resource for people is also, their church can help them too. Sometimes those ties do have resources available. Different places even have scholarships. Nonprofits can, help with someone to be able to afford and get into a treatment. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, and there's not one size fits all. And some people try different ways. Only 10% of the population actually seeks treatment, and that's a low amount. And, the risk of relapse is something a person is in recovery every single day for the rest of their lives. So it's an ongoing treatment. It's not just, for a certain amount of time. Yeah. And there are people that, some of my clients are in their late 70s or early 80s, and they still go to meetings. So it's, again, there's just no answer for each person. And you never know what they've been through and kind of what led them to this problem in their life. We all know someone that is, that has struggled with addiction. We've all witnessed and been a part, be it in a friendship, a relationship, or coworker. We see it, and we see their lives affected by it in a negative way. But all we can do is support them in their endeavors to try to stay clean. And I think it's important too that when you are trying to be encouraging of someone, that you can be helpful in the ways of doing things that don't involve environments or activities that could be triggers. Like if you know that your coworker is in recovery, why would you ask them, or why would the work function be at a bar? It's being sensitive to things like that, because for some people in recovery, like they just can no longer be in those situations. Some people are at a point where they're okay to still attend and say no. But again, there's not a one size fits all. And I think that even like with my clients, who are, who want to lose weight, if I'm trying to be a friend to them, I'm not going to ask them out to lunch or out to dinner, like, let's go for a walk, let's go to a movie, something like that. So we can all be a little bit more mindful of our interactions with people. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit with someone. And that's okay too, because sometimes being alone and feeling alone and isolated in your recovery is hard. Sometimes just even, asking someone if they just want to come over and hang out. That's okay too. We don't have to live in a world of so many distractions. Just being in the presence of someone else is really nice.
I like that. Can you walk me through your journey of bodybuilding? Like what got you into this and how did that sort of progress for you?
When I started my fitness studio, a lot of my clients would say, how come you never do any bodybuilding or anything like that? You're so fit. And, it never really crossed my mind. And I always had the visualization of like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the big beefed out muscles everywhere, and I was aware too from working in the corporate fitness side of things and coworkers and so forth that, they're using performance enhancing drugs. So I was like, it's not really something that I want to teeter with, because I struggle with once I start something, I'm going to take it and run with it. So anyhow, my coworker said, Have you ever heard of natural bodybuilding? And I was like, no, what's that? And he was like, basically, you work hard, you eat right, and they drug test you, and you should try a show, and I'll help you. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know, I guess, but it was in December that we had that conversation, and the first local show was in March. And so I kind of did the whole like, okay, New Year's resolution, and I signed up for it. It was in March,
3 months.
and by my second show, I won my professional status, and so I just kind of like fell into it. After that, I got asked to be on Team USA, and I went to Italy, and it's taken me all over the world: Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, France. I'm gonna go to Bali in June. I never really thought that I would be a part of, but because I played basketball and I've always been athletic, it really helps fulfill that competitive side of being an athlete. I never thought that I would like be in a bikini on a stage when I was like a basketball chick with shorts down to my knees and high knee socks, everything, but
Yeah.
uh, it gives me a goal as well, something to work towards, because my life is exercise. I could certainly just go through the motions every day, but if I want results and if I want to continue self-improvement, then I need something to work towards, right? And so that's what bodybuilding fulfills for me.
Mm.
I also just really enjoy, and I got this from my mom, like I'm a very kind of I love shopping. I love clothes. I love thrifting. So like everything I do, like my accessories, all this kind of stuff, I love putting all of that together in my outfits for a show too. I like that creativity. I
Mm.
like being on stage. I like being on camera. I like performing. And
Yeah.
also, like for the people that follow me and that I help, I practice what I preach. I model the behavior that I don't have any expectation of anyone to do what I'm doing, right? But I think that it helps when someone walks in my studio and sees all of my trophies and awards that I'm working hard and I have a fitness goal as well. And so I can relate to others when it comes to like, eating healthy and exercising when you really don't want to, the discipline,
Mm.
and that it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, all of that. So sticking with something, being committed. So all of those things help me to help other people as well.
I love that. You've got to really sculpt your entire body, which means every single muscle has to be worked out to a certain, to be able to achieve a certain look. Your body fat content is being measured, like what you eat, your input, your output, like the amount of exercise and the specific isolated muscle that you're working out, like, to make it this perfectly sculpted kind of shape. Walk me through, like, how is that for you?
The thick of it, like I was supposed to eat like 30 minutes ago, so I'm starting to fade out, and that's normal because I'm 3 weeks away from a show. I struggle with diet brain. It's
Ah.
finding fuel in the tank when there's nothing in there. It's lifting heavy. It's mentally at this point where I'm at right now, 3 weeks out, it's all up in my head. It's not so much the physical part of it. But it's pushing through like when there's just like an empty tank and it's just digging deep and knowing it's only temporary. My why has to be stronger than my excuses. And for me, in May, I'm going to compete in Los Angeles, and then 2 weeks later, go to Bali and represent the United States. So it's like I have a very strong why, but it's really, it's a lot of repetition of doing the same boring things over and over again. That can be from my choreography to the weights that I do, and it's increasing, the load over time, which gets harder and harder, right, as the diet gets stricter and stricter. But it's a process, and I have a coach that helps me because I'm a coach's daughter. I like to have that accountability, which also helps me relate to my clients and the fact that like I'm not gonna go do it by myself. I'm human. I'm not gonna wake up early or stay up late and do it. So I don't like exercising by myself, and that's it could just be like that someone's literally just sitting in the room, but I won't go do it by myself. So
Interesting.
it's tough.
And what's your diet like? Is it
I will
mostly
not talk
carnivorous?
about
Is
it
it just
right
like
now.
meat?
It's just protein. It's a protein, vegetables, asparagus, maybe sweet potatoes. So it's not so much like a calorie count, but it is low for how much exercise that I'm doing. But it kind of changes based on what I see in the mirror. And it's not necessarily about achieving a certain weight or body fat percentage, but more the shape and symmetry of my upper and lower body.
Right, that makes sense. I know we always talk about addiction in a very dark manner, right? Like addiction to drugs and addiction to alcohol and whatever not. But for someone who's an athlete, do you kind of feel like you have to be slightly addicted or obsessed with, working out in order to be a successful athlete?
I think in some ways, yes. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. Passion and obsession can be interchangeable, right? But I think that for me, it really is like it's an everyday constant. It's a priority. But at the same time, as an adult, right, we have responsibilities and things that we have to do. So as disciplined as I am, there are times when it's like, if I didn't get to do it now, then yeah, I have to stay up later and do it. So I am very driven in that way and obsessed in that way. Like I'm not going to just not do it because someone walked in and, I understand that making the sale is a lot more important than, whether I did 3 sets of something, then I'm going to have to get to that later. And that can get really stressful, right? When you're trying to balance everything. But it's waking up early and doing the choreography before my first client comes. It's things like that where you're trying to make time where there is no time, but you have to get it done.
That's really, really impressive. Dr. Megan, final thoughts. Share with us your social media platform and a little message that you would like to impart to our listeners today before we end the episode.
Sure. So my Instagram is dr.megan_everybody's fit. On my Facebook, I'm Megan Johnson McCullough. I also have my Everybody's Fit page as well. I've got my YouTube channel, Fit Life, Everybody's Fit on there. I have a really strong YouTube following and videos that I post daily. Of myself, clients doing a daily exercise. I kind of give like a Fit Life chat every morning. I've got stuff on there like just my life too, like with my wonderful husband, and I make pug videos every day with fitness. I have my cell phone app, FitPace, that I created, which is in the Google Play Store. I've got my books that I've written on Amazon. If you look up my author account, Megan Johnson McCullough. And then there's all of this is like all found on my website, Everybody's Fit Oceanside. So like you could find all of that information one-stop shop on my website.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your journey with us, the hard but also the super successful side of everything, and like the way that you've sort of turned adversity into something so powerful.
Thank you for letting me share my story, and I hope that it can help someone else out there.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas Thierry, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.